All right, Joey Burton, I appreciate you for taking the time and honestly getting back to me so quickly. Like I DM'd you, was like, hey, think you come on the pod. I've been honestly following your content for at least I'd say like 5 or 6 months now. I think I gave you the Twitter follow and just seeing your live tweets through all the NBA playoffs, obviously through the regular season too, a little bit. I just absolutely love the content you've put out. So the fact that you like got back to me so quick, that doesn't happen everywhere. Like it just shows again, I don't know you at all, but the fact that you were just willing to just make time for me on, Monday night when you could be watching the Nuggets close out this series right now, it means a lot. So I appreciate it.
Oh, it's my pleasure. Any chance I can help a fellow coach, and just any time that I get help, maybe other coaches that will benefit from listening to this podcast. I respect the desire to share and to help others grow. And so anytime I could be a part of that, I'm all for it, no matter if it's in the middle of a playoff game.
I love it. I want to go right into the deep dive of your Twitter personality. I love the fact that you teach through the clips, like legit a 5-second clip. And it seems like you're live clipping it too. Are you legit just picking your phone up, like playing it back, recording
nothing sexy, just the old
no, but it doesn't need to be. But like the way that you can describe what's happening in limited characters. You don't need three threads all the time to say what you have to say. Like not everyone can do that. And that just obviously goes to the teaching element, but being able to put it in text and I'm like, oh damn, he notices this, he noticed that. Like how much film, just kind of talk about your process. Obviously you can get to the social media piece, but just really general, between watching film, what kind of gave you the desire to start sharing stuff on social? Just kind of a little bit of background on you.
Well, I love watching basketball. I mean, I think that's a big part of my growth, is just to dive into the game. I spent a lot of time when I was a younger coach diving into notes and diving into what coaches were teaching. And I think there's value in that. But man, as I've gotten older, the game is the greatest teacher. And you can learn so much from the game. And so I have a heart for helping other coaches. I want to, maybe impact one other coach, or, if my tweet could help another coach get better, that means I'm helping other players get better as well. And so it started really like, man, I think it was like it was the tournament that was in Indy. I was actually in Indy at the time. That's where I was living when it was the COVID, and it was all in Indianapolis.
The bubble,
in the bubble. And I was just, I just started doing it, and then I started to get traction, and people were saying, "Hey, this is some good stuff," and I'm like, "No, I'm just going to keep doing it." And so I did it. I've been doing it each tournament ever since heavily. Sometimes my travel schedule and all doesn't allow me to do as much during the season, but that's how it started with the Twitter. But Twitter's made me a better coach. Not only is there information on there, but before they have allowed so many characters.
Right.
I believe I was on Twitter when it was like, I think it was like 120.
Yeah, it was tight. You had to be real tight with it.
And so it really like helped me to condense my thoughts. And I'm really big on, simplicity and, finding, words and phrases that are going to have a lot of power and impact in remembering a concept or remembering an action. So when I first started on Twitter, it was a very small amount of characters. Now it's a lot more, but it's I do this to help others, but it impacts me. It makes me better to have to think and think on the fly sometimes of what's going on and how can I explain it with some clarity and with the ability to help others get better.
I would assume you've also been able to connect with a ton of coaches, maybe that you hadn't met in person, or other trainers also, right? Like just kind of bouncing ideas off each other. Twitter's got I feel like it's a pretty positive place generally in the basketball industry. But yeah, I'm sure the connections have gone a long way as well, right?
Oh, definitely. I've had coaches follow me that I've watched on TV, or I've watched their games, and so it's been pretty interesting, in regards to that. And for other coaches that are listening, that it is a good networking tool.
Yeah.
I didn't start this to try and get connected with all these coaches and what's
Right.
my plan. I think the best networking is your ability to help others, and when you can show that you have value and you can help
Yeah.
others, that's when your networking potential is at its best. And so I think that's what happened. I started to do this, and people started to catch on, players, coaches,
Yeah.
and it's been really cool to see the some of the coaches that I've watched from afar that have followed me,
Yeah.
or
That's awesome.
seeing somebody that I never would have imagined had
Yeah.
any interest in what I'm saying, wanting to follow me and interact with my tweets. So it's an honor, but like I said, it's about just helping others.
And you started sharing way before the Twitter days. Again, I did my homework, so I read through a couple of your blog spot the articles on
Yeah,
there.
yeah,
That stuff is so cool to me, and the fact that it's still up there. And I think it
yeah,
was like 2013. I think I saw a
yeah,
date on there. Like, was that kind of the initial, like, you just getting started in the training business?
yeah.
How did
Well,
how did that evolve?
I actually I was a coach first. I coached high
Okay,
school basketball, and then I
nice.
was on staff at Mississippi State with the women's team from
Okay,
2007 to 2012. And
represent Joey. I love it.
yeah, yeah. So I've coached women's basketball, which I enjoyed. Um, and so one of my early career mentors is a guy by the name of Bob Starkey, a great legendary
LSU, yeah.
at LSU, and he was at LSU at the time. And
Yeah.
I don't know how we got connected, because we were playing against each other, and I just remember him having a blog. I think it was hoopdots.blogspot.com, and I just remember I would check that like every morning, and like Bob is
Right.
a guy that's up at like 5 a.m. working, right? And so I was like, man, he's had an impact on me. Why can't I do this to have an impact on others? And so just taking coaching articles I would read, and anything that I would read that pertained to leadership, and just putting them in a blog post. It wasn't an original thought, but I try to always bring it back to coaching. And
Right.
so like I said, Bob Starkey had a huge impact in my career, early in my career, and today he still does. But he was the inspiration behind it.
I love it. So you touched on the fact that you were coaching at Mississippi State on the
Mm,
women's side, and now you're training, you have NBA clients. Can
yeah,
you just talk about like that transition of kind of deciding to maybe get out of coaching and start your own thing, and maybe
yeah,
just some of the factors? I don't know how many stops there were in between that, but
yeah,
kind of how you gotten to where you are from being, all in the Division I basketball
yeah,
world, which is crazy, go, go, go. And I'm sure it's very similar now, but there's
yeah,
obviously some differences in terms of you kind of running your, obviously probably not running your own schedule, but
sure,
being maybe a little more flexible at different times of the year. What kind of
yeah.
went into that decision?
Well, our coach retired, and they brought in Vic Schaefer,
Yeah.
and Vic wanted his own staff. Totally get
Hmm.
it. And so I wasn't quite sure what the next step was for me,
Right.
and it was a tough time, because I didn't know. I really thought like I might not ever coach college basketball again, and I think
Right.
that's initially something people's thoughts when they go through a coaching transition.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so I was trying to get jobs. I did want to be on the floor coaching. I didn't want.
Right.
I was in an admin role as the ops, so I was ops and video, and I wanted to be on the floor coaching, and I just couldn't get a job. And
Yeah.
it was frustrating. And
Hmm.
finally, in September of 2012, a man by the name of Ed Schilling, who's now an assistant at Grand Canyon, he was running a basketball academy in Indianapolis and coaching at a high level high school. And I heard of him because he has a unique story. He went from coaching high school to working for Calipari at UMass, then
Okay.
going from UMass to the New Jersey Nets. And
Oh,
he
well.
went from high school to college to
Yeah.
the NBA all in one like season, of it was like whatever, from April to April. And
Right.
So I knew of his story. I knew of him, and I was introduced to him. And so he actually invited me up to Indianapolis, and I spent a week with him, and I really liked what he did. Skill development was something that was very dear to me, because I think player development has the opportunity to really show that you care. And one thing it's taught me, and I've said this on other podcasts, is that players, the old saying, players don't care how much you know until they know how much
Right.
you care. That's a very true statement. But I think really, from my experience, players don't really care how much you know. I mean, how much you care. They just want to know, are you making them better?
Right.
And so you really could show your care for them by how you're improving them and developing them. And then when it comes time to, hey, I need you to sprint back in transition. I need you to, really sit down on defense. I need you to stay engaged when you're on the weak side. When you're holding them accountable to other areas of the game, they'll trust you because
Yeah.
they know they're getting better. So I was always intrigued by skill development, and he was one of the best at it. So I moved up to Indianapolis with my wife. I got her approval, and it wasn't all cookies and cream when we got up there.
Right.
I felt like I was going from an ops job back to a GA job. I was only getting paid $1,500 a month, and I was able to coach a high school team.
Yeah.
Actually, that year was I was an eighth grade coach and then a volunteer varsity assistant coach on the eighth grade team. Jaron Jackson Jr. of the Memphis Grizzlies
Okay.
was on the team, and so I just was wanting to learn, and I knew there was going to be an opportunity to work with NBA players through Ed Schilling, because he had pre-draft in Indianapolis, and he took a job 7 months after I got up there with Steve Alford at UCLA. And so he said, hey, you could just take over what I'm doing. And it was just a tremendous blessing that he let me just take over. But what I didn't understand was it wasn't about academy. It was about the person. And Ed was so good, and he had so many players' trust that all that stuff just went away. And so I literally just had to, it was a dark time in my life. I had to just build from scratch. And, I had to, it really, and kind of why I sent that tweet, we'll talk about it later, the thread, but, I really asked myself, why did I get into this? Did I really get in this for the status of being at a high level of basketball, or did I get in this to really impact players? And that's why I got into this. And so it really was a dark time and a time of suffering and sacrifice, but it really molded me into what I really wanted to be as a coach. And whether it was going to be, I didn't think I was going to be working with NBA players or, being in some of the positions I've been able to be in, but it really allowed me to find who I was as a coach during those times. And then just through, seeing that at the time there was, social media was starting to have videos and all. I just saw a lot of trainers, I don't want to say it was bad or anything, but just a lot of dribble moves and, a lot of ISO moves. Like, that's not going to be what coaches want. That's not going to be good for every player. So I started to really focus on shooting. It's something I've always been intrigued about. And when I played, that's what I did, was shoot. So I always, was reading about it when I was playing, because we didn't have trainers back then. And so I said, well, I just want to help players become better shooters. And so I said, that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to try and brand myself not as a shooting coach, but helping players get better through shooting. And just one thing led to another, one connection helped one player get better, and then another player saw that. And eventually it just continued to grow to where now I get to work with NBA players. I still work with youth players. I enjoy helping anybody that is wanting to get better. And so, but the majority of the time I spend is with NBA players or high level college players.
Being in that ops role and then going back to high school, ending up in the NBA, can you touch on developing your coaching voice? I'm sure, you're at Division I level, but you're not on the floor. So you're kind of seeing how everyone else is kind of doing it, how coaches are communicating, then going back to high school and now having to kind of run that all yourself right away. Maybe how you kind of got more confident. I know that for me, in my first season, it was okay, who am I going to be on the floor coaching? Like, what's
Yeah.
my demeanor going to be like, and I know so many coaches too, you hear it all the time in podcasts. It's like, you don't want to be who your mentor is. You got to be you. And I think I've figured that out, for sure. Like, obviously still trying to get better. But just in terms of developing that voice, being young, especially, and there's certain things that what I say it's not going to mean the same as the other assistant who has got 20 years of experience. So that's also the part of just kind of letting your ego go at the door there, and but still working on developing voice and confidence early in your career.
I think really the thing that helped me is just teaching. Just think of your voice as a teacher, not a teacher in the classroom, but can you be clear? Can you be concise? Consistent. It's that voice, and the best way to develop that is to use it. And so I worked with when I was at Mississippi State. I worked with a coach named Sharona Reeves, and she was at West Virginia. And this was my second year in Indianapolis, and she asked me if I would come out to West Virginia and spend like 2 days with them talking skill development. And I was like, man, I'm only 2 years in. I mean, I'm learning a lot out. I don't know if this is going to be good. I don't know if they're going to like what I do. And I'm still trying to, organize my own play.
Right.
And so I go out there and, I start putting like the managers through the workouts and the practice players through the workouts and all. And, we took a break and for lunch, and she said, Joey, this is really good. Like, I mean, when you're at Mississippi State, I didn't know this existed. I knew you were good at some things, but I didn't know this existed. And I said, yeah, me neither. But you know what? I was doing workouts in a week. I was doing maybe, 25, 30 workouts in a week. Yeah. And I said, so when you are doing 4 workouts a week, or 4 hours of workouts a week or whatever it is, I'm doing that in a day. So I'm going to get better just simply through repetition, not better than her, but I'm just saying better what I do through repetition. And so that's where I tell young coaches is find a place to use it. And it might be with the 15th player. One of the things my last year at Mississippi State, I was able to be elevated. One of the coaches got released in the middle of the year. I was able to get elevated to the assistant coach role. And for the rest of the season, it was last maybe 12, 13 games a season. And I just stayed after practice with like some of the freshmen that weren't playing. Right. I just wanted to get more experience on the floor. So if we had time allotted, I'd just stay after, work with them, try and work on their shot and, just trying to get practice. And then when I finally got up to Indianapolis, I was able to start doing my own workouts. Then I was really able to elevate my voice. And so I think a lot of times young coaches are afraid to use it. And just like we tell players, like, use it and you might say the wrong thing or you might talk a little too long. It's okay. Get better. Find better ways. Continue to learn, just like we tell players. So using your voice is an important way to do it. And I think also, if I'm in a team setting, just using your voice sporadically with players in individual conversations. If they're sitting out, they're in the drill, you saw something, communicate that with them. You don't have to try and be the voice that speaks to the whole team. A lot of times just having those individual moments with players is huge.
That's so good. The pre-practice, post-practice, because then you can also like try some stuff, right? Like, and that's the only time that you can really, okay, you were thinking about this drill that you maybe wrote down a couple times and you're like, I want to use it, but I'm not sure how it's going to, right? And that's where you can kind of experiment a little bit. And like you said, if you say the wrong thing, like it's fine. These kids are just really happy. The kids that aren't playing, that you're out there with them, grinding with them anyway, right?
Yes. There's that element. And the best, what made me become my best at being a shooting coach was when I spent a year and a half working with sixth, seventh, and eighth graders, not ever thinking an NBA player would want to work with me, because that's where I was able to experiment. That's where I was able to try new things. I saw things that worked. Hey, this isn't only working for this player, it's working for most of the players that I work with. And so that was huge. And then when I found out, like, a lot of players that are 19, 20 have the same habits that they had in the sixth, seventh, and eighth grade, I was like, wow, that's why I went through that, because a lot of the fixes that I did with sixth, seventh, and eighth graders were going to be the same fixes I was going to do with NBA players. Just at the time, I didn't know I was going to be working with NBA players, you know? And so anytime you could get in those moments of working with a player and trying some new things and working out your own philosophy is so beneficial.
Yeah, no, that's good. And you touched on shooting a couple of times now, so I have to ask. I still feel like for me, that's definitely the area, like, I don't have a clear philosophy on yet of like, all right, you can tell when a kid's shot is just, it doesn't look right, but it's like, what do we fix? What is it like? What's going to take a really long time and maybe it's not worth fixing? Like, where do you even start with creating a shooting philosophy? And the other problem that I have too is I feel like I consume so much content between, clinics and, what's this drill and this form, and everyone's teaching it a little bit differently. Like, do you recommend that you have one mentor, one person that's the shooting person that you're going to listen to, and you stick with that, as opposed to maybe listening to a few tips from this guy, a few more from this girl? Like, how do you kind of figure out your shooting philosophy? That's definitely an area that I still like have not totally, and you'll never really master it, I guess, but I've not had a consistent plan on how I'm going to attack improving someone's shot.
First of all, I think the most important thing for me was just studying a lot of different shooters. And defense is like a lot about rules, right? Like, we got to do this, we're here, we're that. And I don't think shooting could be like that. I think you could find principles of shooting, like, just simply look at, like, Steph Curry. He has great arc. Trae Young has great arc. My client George Niang, great arc. And so that's a principle I've seen with great shooters. They have great arc. Well, now how do they generate, or how some of these players generate it? Well, Trae Young, he generates it with more of an early push. My guy George Niang used to sling it back to try and generate it, and we got it more in front of his face. So what generates arc, in my opinion, is making sure that the ball path and everything's going up, and we don't want to have things going forward. So I kind of just started to look at what are some of the common principles. For an example, you don't see many great shooters swing the ball across their body, right? If they're right-handed, they're not swinging it across to their left. Now, there's an exception to every rule, but you see great shooters like a Steph Curry, his brother Seth, Klay Thompson, JJ Redick, Duncan Robinson, Steve Nash, Dirk Nowitzki, Devin Booker. They all shoot on the dominant side of their body. So here you've got a whole broad spectrum. Larry Bird did it. You got this whole broad spectrum of different players. And I see some commonalities. I see, are there hands positions exactly the same? No. Are there, elbow positions exactly the same? No. But I start to see, okay, dominant side of their body. There's great arc. How are their feet? Are their feet, their feet are mostly underneath their hips for good balance, things like that. So I just start to see those commonalities. And then I'm like, okay, how could I get a player to shoot their own unique way, all right, or their own way that's comfortable, but try and get them to fall into these principles. And so what I just label it like 3 P's. You got positions, and it could be your hand position on the ball. It could be your wrist position, right? We got these positions of when we push up, we want to finish with the high follow through. So we have, when I look at a player, I look at their positions of the ball, of their body. Some players get too far forward with their shoulder.
I want to get technical. I'm going to jump in. Like,
Yeah.
so if you're, you're breaking down someone's shot, are you standing in front of them, behind them? Are you all like, where do you kind of, okay.
All angles. So I was just working with the NBA player who just came to me and never, I saw him on film, but I never saw him in person shoot the ball.
Yeah.
And so he had a tendency to sling it back. So I spent a lot of time on his left side because I wanted to see the ball starting to get pushed at his eyebrow level rather than above his head, right? So, but there's different angles. Maybe they're having a non-shooting hand issue. So then I'll stand on the left. Maybe they're having alignment issues where they're constantly missing right or left. Well, then that's when I'll stand behind. So sometimes the central focus of what we're trying to accomplish that workout will determine where I stand. And then as it goes on, I'll always kind of, walk around and look at different angles. But whatever the central purpose of that workout is probably going to be the majority of the place I'm going to stand and what I need to see. And then just go on. Then we got patterns, right? You got positions, ball, and then the patterns of the ball path, the where are you starting to push at? The follow through. Is it going all off to the right or to the left? And so we'll focus on patterns. I have a kid going to Louisville right now. His positions are good, and his patterns are pretty solid. We needed to get him to have a little bit of a higher follow through, and then the final P is performance, and that's where I think a lot of coaches we struggle with because we're afraid of the performance piece of shooting, meaning that if we start messing with their shot, are they going to, what happens in a game is going to mess them up mentally. Well, that's where we have to create a space, and I call it just a safe space for shooters, where we go with live defenders, and it could be a small-sided game of 1-on-1, 2-on-2, but you go with defenders and you allow them to miss shots without any consequences. And so the only thing we're trying to do, it's a bad shot if you didn't try and do the things we work on. So if we worked on making sure you're not slinging it back and you go right back to slinging it back and you're making some, not good.
Right.
And so the performance part for me isn't the game necessarily. Obviously that's the final resort and that's what we're focusing on. But for me, it's creating the drills and the environments for a shooter that has worked on their positions, their patterns. Now I've created an environment to work on their performance. And that's, I think, really sometimes missing because we want to make everything competitive and I'm all for that. We need to have, players that have high competitive character, but we also want players to be confident. And sometimes if we allow that environment of saying it's okay to miss, but we're playing live, we're going to play, 1v1, 2v2, and you're going to shoot some contested shots. And let's see if you could maintain the discipline and focus to be able to execute what we've been working on. I think that helps players a lot in transitioning their shot from practice or changing it or improving it to the actual game.
No, that's so good. I was going to ask you about that, the balance of competing and learning and actually, they just really butt heads with one another sometimes.
Yeah.
And, players just trying to win the drill as opposed to focusing on what the point of the drill is. So that's really good, adding some live defenders, but also just the purpose of not counting those shots if they're not doing it the right way.
Yeah. And it's tough because we want competitors, but we also want process-oriented thinkers. So it's a balance. And, it's easy for me to say because I'm not in I'm not getting judged off of wins and losses. And so I try and be careful about speaking too much into the coaching profession because I know it's about wins and losses,
right.
And that does, change, and jobs are on the line and that changes, your livelihood. My profession, we don't have as much at stake, and, I don't think it's fair, but we're the ones that rarely ever get blamed for anything. We'll take all the praise, but we rarely get blamed for anything. So that the balance between being competitive and then really trying to have a learning environment. I think it's like more, let's be skill focused in competitive drills, and our focus is going to be like, hey, if we're working on playing off of two, like we're going to maybe even put a constraint in there and say, hey, you have to score playing off of two. Today we're in a workout and we're just working on, and I posted on my social media, but we're just working on getting separation from a defender. And I just call it escape 1v1. And you have a defender on your hip, you're on the wing, you're about 15, 16 feet away from the basket. And you get two dribbles to try and find space, escape to space. And so I want these players to, extend their dribble out to try and cover as much ground. That was, we went up to 5, but that was more important to me than who won the drill. And
Yeah.
so if players, I think players will, when it's being constantly affirmed and constantly like praised about them executing the
The
skill,
process.
the process, and executing the skill, no matter the result, they are more open to trying the skill and to implementing the skill than if it's like, hey, we're going out there now, we know 3-on-3, and if I got 3-on-3 and I don't win this thing, I'm getting ran to death. I don't care. Coach says I need to work on this.
Yeah.
I know I could get a bucket this way. I'm going to go get the bucket this way.
Yeah.
And so I think it's a balance, but it's easy for me to say that because my job isn't based on wins and losses.
I wanted to ask you about shooting warm-ups too. So, you can talk generally also about warm-ups, but if we're doing a specific shooting workout, I know sometimes it's like some players too, even at the college level, like they just want to come in and shoot threes right away. I'm like, I feel like I remember for me as a player, I remember like I would want to start in close, work my way back. What are your thoughts about like making sure the player is warm, and what are some ways maybe outside of just the basic form, unless you think that's great too, like basic form shooting, like how do we really get a foundation like kind of activated, ready to go to be able to shoot the ball well? The worst thing is, I know, you have someone coming in and they can't make a shot in the first shooting drill you're doing, and you're trying to kind of, all right, let's go closer, to really get them warm. Because, when a kid is in a rhythm, there's nothing better than shooting drills and competing, against the clock and for a score and whatnot. But just getting players warm for a shooting workout.
I'll do form shooting. I don't do any of the one hand anymore because I noticed over the years a player could be perfect with their one hand, and as soon as they put their non-shooting hand, they tend to go right back to what they were doing. Right. So I really will emphasize, what our 3 principles are. So for a player, it might be getting the ball to their dominant side. So that'd be one principle. Then the other principle might be, they're pushing a little too forward, so we want to push it up, right? Another one might be rhythm, right? Making sure we've got a good rhythm. So I try and label or identify when I work with players, hey, these are the 3 things that we know if you do these things, it gives you the best chance at making it. So whatever those things are, that's going to be our focus in our warm up. Yeah. Now, my form shooting isn't traditionally where you just stand. I want them moving. So I'll stand underneath the basket, just something as simple. Now they'll go the same form shooting speed where I want them really feeling their form. So I'll just have them start the nail and I toss the ball out maybe to the second hash, and they got to go there, make sure everything's good, form shot, and then they shoot it. I get the rebound. I'll toss it back out to maybe the opposite elbow. Gotcha. So now we're working on different different angles. We're working on different distances. So we're not just sitting in front of the rim shooting 5 and then take a step back. That's what I grew up on. Right. I used to do all that, but I was like, this isn't translating. I need to keep trying to tinker with it. Form shooting could be I'm gonna make a tweet about this, but a lot of the form shooting could be like even balance drills. That those are becoming popular. Where you hop, and I think they're good. Don't get me wrong. I use some of them, but one thing about it, if we're really focused on trying to get them to focus on balance, well, we can't tell them like starting your right foot, side hop to your left foot, and then come back to your right foot and shoot it, because now their whole body and mind is going to be focused on making sure they're on balance on that last hop. No, I want them just going side to side, and then I'll tell them when to shoot the ball. So now they got to get their balance a lot quicker.
Gotcha.
You know?
Gotcha. So they're going back and forth. You'll tell them when to stop. So they don't know. They're not ready.
They're trying to get their balance. Gotcha. And I tell them, hey, if you don't feel like you have balance, get to another one. But it just makes them stay engaged. So I'll do some of that type of stuff for shooting. Another thing I'll do is having, if it's I have multiple players. So the first drill I talked about where you're tossing it out. Well, now we're doing the same thing. They're going to toss out. Maybe we're not going to be like any closer than like a 10 foot, radius. So you got to toss out past the 10-foot radius. But let's say you toss it out towards the elbow. Now I'm going to close out and I'm going to give you a read before you shoot. So we're still going to go form shooting. We're not going to speed it up too much. And so like if I close out short, shot. If I close out to your right shoulder, you're going to pivot, and we're not going to go straight line drive. We're just going to do a side step or a pivot, and go laterally to work on our pivots into our shot, right? So now they're having to catch the ball, make a read, then execute the read, and then get into their form shooting. Yeah. I'll do bad pass form shooting.
I love that. I love that. Yeah.
And so there's bad pass form shooting. I'll do form shooting with players standing like just with their hands down in front of the player, and they're kind of doing some flow dribbles. You're just working on some, ball handling, and this is right around the nail area. And then when the offensive player picks it up, the defense player just goes and contests. And we're not trying to block the shot, but we're just trying to add randomness and variability. And so then we'll move out, into the threes. Once I feel like they got, a good amount of reps, and I see that the three principles that we're working on, like, hey, they're locked in on it. Let's move on. Now, I'll say this: there's a balance with, like, I haven't sold out to this, but I think there would be if starter's different, but if you have a player that's always coming off the bench, and if we timed when they sat down on the bench and when they got in, let's say they get in at the under 14 mark, you got a TV time out there, right? Then, but you got the introductions and all. Like, when's the last time they touched the ball?
That's a good point. Maybe, for the women's game, the end of the quarter. Yeah, it's like you're getting in
so
like
if
2
it's the end of the
left.
quarter, they're coming in the second quarter.
Same thing. Yeah, I totally get it. Yeah,
right there. Or they come in the second quarter. They don't play the first, but they come in the second quarter.
Right.
Like, is it? And now they go in. Is it bad that they come into the gym one day and you just say, hey, shoot threes, let's go? Right. I mean, I'm not sold out that that's how you got to do it every time, but I think there might be some value there.
And mentally, maybe even more than anything,
like,
right?
Can you make it three cold? And I tell my players, one of my clients, George Ning, how he went from a two-way and worked his way up into a full rotational role, but it started with him, maybe not coming into like the second quarter, and he got 1 3.
Right.
He has to make it, or maybe in the game he got 3. He would go 1 for 3, or maybe some games he'd go 1 for 1. Some games go 1 for 2. There's games he didn't make one, but like, that's tough. Yeah. And are we training that for our 7th and 8th, person? So, so that's how I usually will warm them up. Try and get them moving. It could be, anything. You could do toss outs. They could do toss outs by themselves, but anything I could do to get them moving, to get them thinking, right, reacting, and into it. Another quick drill I'll do. It's not really for shooting, but if I have multiple players, even if we're going to do focus shooting, is just I'll have a player with the ball at top, a player at the top of the key, and then another player at the top of the charge circle. And the player with the ball is, driving in, and the player at the top of the key isn't going to defend them by going with them, but they're just going to try and make it like double move. So they might, if the ball's in their right hand, they might jump in front of the right hand. So now that player has to make a move. They can maybe get another like lateral move to get the player to have to, think twice, or maybe make another move. That's great. And then the low man will make them make a decision. If the low man stays back, all right, the player knows that they have to get into a little paint shot, floater. If the low man like goes toward the dribbler or the ball handler, now that ball handler has to get around him to go to the rim. So even though that's not a shooting drill, we'll do that sometimes, because now we're working on,
and it's random. Yeah.
Ball handling. We're working on some randomness, reads. We're working on obviously their handle. They're shooting a layup once, and the next time they're shooting a floater, and we'll do that. And we do that in the middle of the floor. Sometimes we'll even do it on the wings, and then boom, we're right into full-time shooting. We're not doing any form shooting, or hey, let's start in the middies and move out. We're right in full game shooting. So just over the years, just trying to mimic what the game is. And I was just talking to a high school coach about this today. Game shots, game spots, game speeds. That's what I grew up on. That's what, I think is still preached a lot today. And I want more game context. And what's the game context? That player that doesn't that's been sitting on the bench for 15 minutes, and they got to come in, and she or he really wants to make the three, and we need them to make the three, but have we prepared them to sit for 15 minutes before they even shoot the ball? That's game context.
No, that's good. The last piece I wanted to hit on in terms of shooting is footwork.
Yeah.
So I know, like, even within our staff, we're always, all right, should we be 1-2 hop, and like, should we have a system of how we're going to teach every kid that comes in as a freshman? This is how we're going to shoot. The pivot foot debate, that's a whole separate one too. Yeah. But dominant pivot foot, just footwork in general. How have you kind of approached that? Like when you've got even a high school kid maybe versus an NBA player, just kind of going with what they're comfortable with versus maybe kind of encouraging one way or another. And this could be a long one. So you can, I know.
I don't think it's be that long from my end.
Okay. Good.
They got to be able to do a lot of different footwork. Whatever they're comfortable with. If they're comfortable with it, but it's not allowing them to get it off fast enough, or
that's a good point.
Enough balance, then we might have to change it, for a certain situation. But my basic definition of footwork is allowing your feet to get in the proper position to succeed. That doesn't mean it's always 1-2. It doesn't mean it's hop every time. Last year's finals, I posted this on social media. Steph used like some awkward footwork all in one game. We went like going left. We mostly teach right, left. He went left and stopped on his left foot and shot it, left, right.
Yeah.
That's not what it was. And, the coach when I was coaching at Mississippi State, we'd have freshmen come in and she was always inside pivot foot.
Yeah.
And some of these girls just never really got comfortable with it. And to be quite frank, now it's, I'm not bad mouthing her, but
it's all good.
I just remember looking at film and I'm like, we're teaching this, we're working on it, and they're still not doing it.
Yeah, that is such a good point.
I think that's the best thing that's happened to me as a coach is really analyzing, and it's kind of maybe finding your voice too. Like, what am I teaching, and does that really happen in the game? And so I started evaluating a lot, just what I taught, and I started to see, well, I'm teaching some things that aren't really happening in the game. I used to teach don't dip the ball on a shot. Well, you know what? 90% of shots there's some type of dip, right? And I'm teaching this. Why? Because some great coach told me to do it, and now I'm doing it. And so that's really opened my eyes, because I used to be 1-2, right? Inside pivot foot, I used to on the move, always 1-2, 1-2, 1-2. And now I really, unless I could see their feet are the reason why, or there's a better way to do it, I don't really talk about feet, as long as they're balanced. And if they're balanced, then I'll tell them what they need to do. I use an example of a player I'm working with now. His feet get way too narrow. So I'm constantly reminding him, just Let's get him under your hips. Let's get him under your hips. I don't care if he goes 1-2 or whatnot. I just want his feet underneath his hips when he's starting the shooting motion.
Yeah, Joey, this has been so good. We really went deep into the shooting. I was like, had some, but I was like, no, let's stick on this. So that's been awesome. I'm gonna be respectful of your time and get you out of here on this one. You tweeted, you had a tweet thread. I don't know if it was it last week, maybe a couple days ago?
Last week, earlier this week. Or last week, yeah.
Yeah, got a lot of traction, and I'm gonna read it for anyone who doesn't follow Joey, which you should. So we'll link everything up in the description. But he tweeted, "Life is hard when your most meaningful work isn't monetizing. Most coaches have experienced this at some point, and some may be dealing with it now. It can lead to negative thoughts and emotions. For those who didn't see the tweet, you gave 4 responses for everyone who didn't see it. Can you briefly touch on the 4 of those in terms of don't let profit define you as a person? That was number 1. So this tweet, I read it multiple times and it was like, this is really good stuff. Life is hard when your most meaningful work isn't monetizing. You touched on it a little bit at the beginning, but I'm going to let you go one by one. And I have them here if you don't have them memorized. Things, don't let profit define you as a person.
That thought came on my head that morning and I just started tweeting. So you might have to remind me, but in this profession now with social media, we get so defined by, our profits and how much we're making. And, I just go back to like, that doesn't define you as a person. Your work is meaningful. And that's where I said earlier in this podcast, I had to really get back to why did I get into this? And I got into this because one is that I didn't have a really good coach throughout my entire career. And I wanted to not have some other player experience what I did. So I wanted to have a meaningful impact on a player. And so it's so hard not to allow our profits to define us.
Yeah.
And, I've fallen in that trap, but if you could just stay focused on what your purpose is and why you got into it. I think a lot of times we also, I should maybe even add this, I don't want to be too long. We look at our profit or how much we're making, and if it's good, then we must be on the right path.
Right.
If it's not, then we shouldn't. Well, the lowest amount of money I ever made in my working life from coaching in high school all the way up to after I coached a Division I program was when I was 33 years old. And I thought that for a minute. And now I look back at it and I'm like, man, I'm so glad I didn't give up, because in that dark time and in that time where I was only making $1,500 a month, it's what prepared me to make the most money I've ever made.
That was shaping your philosophy. That was getting your
So we, I think that happens when the profits aren't good. It must not be the right job. And maybe you're being prepared for something bigger. And then the second one was
sacrifice and suffering develops the soul.
It develops.
That's deep.
It develops the soul, and many times we don't want to go through that deep cleansing of the soul that sacrifice and suffering will force us to do, or will cleanse us. And we look at it as it being a negative, and if we could look at it as being positive, it molds us, it shapes us, it's to make us mature and complete. And I came out of that prepared for what was coming forward. If I would have rushed out of that and just said, I give up, I'm done, I wouldn't be able to experience some of the things that I was dreaming of. And in my mind, I'm blown away. When I was at Mississippi State, if you would have told me, by the time you're 40, I was thinking more of maybe being a head coach, but I was like, you're 40, you're going to be working with some of the best players in the world, and you're going to be traveling the country, and you're going to be able to experience some of these unbelievable basketball experiences. I would have laughed at you. So, we don't want to, and it's hard, but we got to allow suffering and sacrifice to mold us into who we need to be. Number 3 was
avoid the comparison trap.
That's I feel like that gets harder each and every year for all of us, even me. And most of the times when I'm in a rut, it's because I'm comparing myself to something or someone or whatnot, and it's an easy way to have a pity party. And
Yeah.
I try and avoid it as much, and I've gotten better as I've gotten older. So if I could, if young coaches out there are listening, stay away from it, run your own race, fight the good fight, and stay true to what you're doing and who you are, because we many times we can't, 5-year, 10-year plan. I'm not really big on those. You have maybe a vision of what you want, but man, there's so much that can happen in 1 year, let alone 5 to 10. And then the final one was
find a side hustle. This one was
yeah.
interesting. I like this one to wrap it.
Finding a side hustle. I knew I wanted to coach, and I didn't have a teacher's license, so I couldn't work at school. And thankfully, I had a neighbor that owned a paint company, and I did good work. So he said, "Hey, you're valuable for 6 hours a day, and I would love this because I need work." So I would wake up 6 in the morning and go paint houses until 2, and get back home and clean up and get to practice at 3:30. And
awesome.
there were days that we'd get done with practice, and I would stay after and work with guys. And now I'm not getting home again until 7 o'clock. But that paid my bills, and it allowed me the freedom. And what it really did was allow me the freedom to I was able to make some money as an assistant, and then but I still was doing the painting, but it allowed me to have the flexibility to do what was best for my career. So I actually resigned that assistant job to go volunteer for a coach that I highly respected, and I thought it was the best coaching year I had in regards to learning and being able to be around a program, right? And so it allowed that. And I think sometimes we are almost a little, like our pride hits us a little bit, that, hey, I want to do all basketball, and I want, I know I'm good enough. I don't see why I need to be doing the side hustle. But luckily with technology, you can do a lot more now. But I don't, I would say just, if you believe in what you're doing, and you're called to doing this, like, there's nothing wrong with getting a side hustle. I probably should have said number 5 is just don't give up. I didn't put that there, but just don't give up. Every time I've thought, and there's times in my training career that I thought, I just don't know if this is it. I just don't know if this is going to happen. And, I stuck with it. And then I look back a year later, I'm like, I can't believe I was thinking like that. So don't give up, man. Things could change quickly, and especially if you're putting in the work and putting in the time.
Joey, this was awesome. I learned a ton. I really do appreciate you for making the time. I will let you get back to Nuggets. Right. I wonder what the score is right now.
Yeah, I don't know.
I will look at all your Twitter followers are missing you right now.
Where's this guy at? Where's this guy at? Well, they'll get a tweet about where I was at, and hopefully they tune in. All right.
Good stuff. Thank you so much again, Joey. I appreciate you.